So I want to have a nice little conversation with all of you about the Leagues of Votann, which you might be surprised to hear me talk about. Because the Leagues of Votann are something that you may have not noted that I would have been super big on chatting about, but I have indeed created a a very light discussion about the actual book, because to me, the Leagues of Votann are unfortunately overshadowed heavily by the fact that they were so busted on release that it overshadows that their internal codex balance is shockingly good. Like some of, if not the best in the game. And you might say, well, Bricky, it's because they have only a couple data sheets. Fair, but their leagues, all 5 of their leagues, I think are equally as good as each other, if not just slightly off. Like it's an entire section of 8s and 9s, where if I were to play Sisters, it's obvious Bloody Rose is the best, and then everything else, and like Sacred Rose is the worst. If you were to play Space Marines, it's obvious Imperial Fists are bad and Salamanders are decent, etc., etc. I think that the Votann Codex is, despite the fact that it was written so overpoweredly, once the points and stuff are adjusted, I think it might be one of the best written codexes they've made. Which is, you first think like, how could something so overpowered be considered the best written? It's like, well, the numbers are tweaked. The numbers are the problem. The actual written internal balance and codex synergy is shockingly good. And I wanted to chat about that a little bit because I don't think they get enough credit for that with how interesting they've been. So let's talk a little bit about the Votann internal balance, right? Now, there's one thing that I do want to state a little bit, which is judgment tokens. Now, the judgment tokens recently got a nerf where any auto wound counted as a 6 to wound. And you'll see that maybe, I don't know if they actually changed that on Wahapedia or not. But the Eye of the Ancestor concept would be that an automatic 6 to wound was, or a 6 to hit auto wound was a 6 to wound. It says if this attack automatically wounds the target as well as its ability purposes, any other rules, the attack is never considered to be an unmodified 6. It used to always be an unmodified 6, but that was insanely strong. So they changed that. The problem is that by doing so, this kind of wreaked a havoc on a lot of the rules in this codex, because many things were taken into account that it was an auto wound of a 6. Magna Rail is one of them, Trans-Hyperian Alliance, and so on. I think that there needs to be a middle ground, and the middle ground is that auto wounding on 4s should not fucking exist. This is a mistake, giant mistake. This should not happen. Italicized, bang. There needs to be a middle ground to still allow it, because if you get an auto wound, it kind of feels bad because then you can never get the 6 to wound. It removes that option basically from you, and it's kind of just a shitty way to go about it. So I feel like there needs to be some kind of proposition in between, which for me looks like this. 1 token is 6s to auto wound, 2 tokens is 5s to auto wound, and 3 tokens is still 5s, but then your auto wounds count as 6s to wound, because auto wounding on 4s should not exist. If you guys are not too familiar with the Votann, if an enemy has a judgment token, that means 6s to hit, auto wound them, and then 5s and then 4s. 4s to hit auto wounding is just dumb. It is incredibly dumb and a bad idea. Instead, there should be some kind of middle ground thing, having 5s to auto wound on 2 tokens, and then sticking with 5s, but allowing the 6s to the auto wounds to count as 6s to wound instead, because it's built too much around this way. The other option would be sixes, then count, and then fives, then count. If you matter, or if you care more about the fives to auto wound or the auto wounding counting as a sixes. It depends on which one you'd like to discuss in that sense. If you don't know how to put on judgment tokens to someone, there's a couple ways. The ways are, if one of your units dies, the person that kills them get one. If the enemy does an action or a psychic action, they get one. And at the end of their turn, you pick an enemy and they gain a judgment token. There is also the call's ability to look at something in your command phase and give it a token. And there are also a few stratagems that allow for tokens, particularly the searchlight on the Harnkin Pioneers. And also there's one where if you kill a character, they automatically get 2, which is kind of funny, but, you know, not particularly smart. So I think what's important is that the auto wounding on sixes is an important nature of the codex, just like how the shuriken weapons in Hail of Doom Eldar is important. They fixed Hail of Doom by making it all encompassing, which is, I think, a pretty good nerf. It obviously worked. Whereas obviously the Votann one was kind of disgusting, but they obviously need some kind of middle ground. 4s to auto wound should not exist in 40k. It is way too dumb. I think the best way to go about it is probably 6, 6, and then 5, or whatever, you know, whatever kind of middle ground thing you can hit. Point being is that I think this should be changed a bit because a lot of the codex relies on the auto wound counting as a 6. Moving on though, let's talk about the League customs. The League customs, the 5 League customs are so good and they're so well balanced. I've never had such decision paralysis ever than I have playing or creating Votann lists. All 5 of these lists are amazing. So let's talk about the Greater Thurian League, right? The Greater Thurian League gets a couple things. The main thing is that they get reroll hit or wound, pretty classic, and counting as 2 models, which is really, really good. I think that this could have maybe been on the USRS, but it's fine. It's a very good ability, but every single Votann faction gets an ancestral judgment. So they get their 2 main customs, but they also get something that affects their token system. The Greater Thurian League gets a really nasty one, which is people that have a judgment token count as 1 more than it has. Now you have to already have a judgment token on you, so you can't go from 0 to 1. But if you have 1, it counts as 2, and 2 counts as 3, which is just really gross. Because then all you need is 2 judgment tokens and you get 4 ups to wound, or 4 ups to hit auto wound, which is just nasty. It is just ridiculous. I think that with this other system here, it might be a bit more relaxed and it won't hurt them as much, especially if you use this one with Greater Thurian League, but it's pretty gross. The other thing to note is that they have Uthar, which allows you to turn a dice into a 6 for something nearby, which is one of the only real ways to get the Magna Rail to splash and the like without just rolling lucky because of the change they made to judgment tokens. But it mainly has them become really consistent with their token stuff. You're going hard into tokens here, right? Like, you get a 5-up CP refund, the ability for the call to give a token you can use twice, which is really fucking good. And Uthar also gets this ability. And you also get the Cuirass here, which is a 4-up invul save, and then you reduce the armor or the AP by 1, stacking with void armor, which on an Einhir champion is just the most disgusting thing ever. It's so good. But it's a lot of fun. Great Thurian League is just a great overall go tall kind of build list. But I want to talk about, I think, a super underrated one, the Trans Rights Alliance. Okay, the Trans Rights Alliance is a really fun subfaction that is massively gimped by the judgment token change. So the Trans-Hyperian Alliance gets, if you had taken damage, you get +1 to your hit for that unit. This is actually really good with a certain stratagem that allows you to shoot back with a big squad of Harnkin or Hearthkin, the main troop. But they also have unmodified wound rolls of 6, increase the AP by 1. Emperor's Children have this. I really, really like this, but the problem is that it's gimped because unmodified wound rolls of 6 don't count if you auto wound with the judgment tokens. This one was banking on the count as a 6 to wound, which is why the Trans-Hyperian Alliance should have some kind of thing like this, because then they can still tech into it a little bit. However, they have some really underrated things here. One, if the unit has 1 or more judgment tokens, just 1 or more, you can reroll a wound roll of 1, which is also really good at building for this. Your 1s can maybe become 6s, right? Which is pretty nice. There's almost no ways to get reroll wound rolls in this book because you're always aiming for auto wounds. This is actually solid. The main reason though, I mean, you can get a 5-up mortal wounds defense, which is good because Votann just die to mortal wounds. And you can give something that makes your Grimnir a little bit better in terms of survivability and deny the witch. But the big one is this one, Nomad Strategist. This is just a classic pick 3 units, redeploy. But you can put those units in strategic reserves, which for most people is kind of whatever. I think for Votann, reserves are insane. They are insanely good. Why? Because Brokir Thunderkin with beams in reserves is disgusting. If you take a 6-man thing of Brokir Thunderkin, you can put them in reserves and then bring them out to perfectly line up your beam weapons at the correct distance for these really slow models. Votann are slow as shit to begin with. And so being able to launch 6 to 12 hits of 3 damage beam across multiple models, thanks to your ability to put them in reserves, I think is insanely good. But not just that, if you're wanting to bring, let's say, 20 blobs of Hearthkin warriors, bringing them out from reserves and then just unloading onto your enemies makes them more survivable because it's hard to hide 20-man blobs, and also gives you the angles you want. I think the slower the army, the more important reserves and redeploys are, especially because Harnkin Pioneers have a pre-game move, so whether or not you get first turn is important. I honestly think that the Trans-Hyperian Alliance Warlord trait is just ludicrously good. I think this means a ton when it comes to the Votann, and they're a sleeper pick overall. But if we want to talk about real sleeper pick, let's talk about the Kronus Hegemony. I think the Kronus Hegemony is absolutely ludicrously good, and no one seems to realize it. I don't know why no one is talking about Kronus. Like, I don't know why, because here's what Kronus Hegemony get. This is your punchy melee group, right? They get, on the first turn of the charge, +1 attack and +1 strength. And if your opponent has 2 judgment tokens, they get +1 AP in melee. Kronus Hegemony, now you might think like, okay, this is pretty solid, but it keeps going from here. They have a 1 CP strat for exploding 6s in melee, which is just great to add more to it. But they also have this warlord trait called Exemplary Hero, which gives you +1 to your attack if you're attacking a character or monster, full rerolls to hit, and +1 to the wound roll. Now, why is that good? Because you have this guy called the Ymyr Champion with 4 attacks. Due to his trait, he now has 5. If you attack a character or monster, he now has 6. He also gets +1 to wound, but who cares about that? Because instead, you run the Exactor, where 6s to hit do D3 +3 mortal wounds, and the attack sequence ends. So if you want to, say, roll up to a character or monster, and you have 6 attacks, you can roll all of them and see if you get any 6s. But because you have full rerolls to hit, you can just roll all your misses again and fish for 6s. Unless you've got wound cap, how many characters are going to survive 2d3 plus 6 mortal wounds for rolling just 2 6s? Not only that, but then you can make another fighty character with the flare. You put this on your high call, and now your call is getting, what is that? You put it on a plasma axe, right? So he gets 4 attacks plus 1 if you are giving them, because you're in Kronus, right? So 5 attacks, and then it's 5 attacks plus 3 more. So it's 8 attacks at 6 minus 3, 2 damage. And then you give them Warrior Lord for full rerolls to wound and ignore wound rerolls. I'm sorry, but like, how's 8 attacks at 2 damage? Watch as I just carve your Nightbringer in half, or Abaddon in half, you know? Or if you want to be really weird, you want to be just kind of just this really hyper specific build that I thought about a bit ago. What if you take Warrior Lord and then you take the Just Blade for ignoring invuls on your Ymyr champion? So now your champion has 5 attacks at strength 6, AP 4, 2 damage, ignoring invuls and phase caps. So your Nightbringer gets no saves. It gets 0. And you just roll up with 2 damage and you just go, and it just dies because your threshold is so good and you reroll wounds. They have nothing they can do about it. They have 0. You just go, not to mention that you might have a judgment token on them, which might even increase the AP more. But then, and you think that's crazy enough as it is, but then let's throw in more to that, right? How about you have Chthonian Berserkers? Now you take them with a heavy plasma axe. Why not, right? You are now hitting at strength 7, AP 3, 2 damage, 4 attacks each. If you have a mole launcher, you get an extra. So that is going to be 21 attacks at 7 minus 3, 2. But what if you're fighting hordes? Oh, look, a sweep profile at strength 6, because Kronus, AP 3, 1 damage. Oh, I don't know. I'll just make 42 attacks. 42 attacks. These things, and they fight on death, by the way. They fight on death, by the way. But let's say you don't want to go too hard into that, okay? How about your classic Ymyr Hearthguard? Oh, look, well, now they're making 4 attacks at strength 7, AP 1, 1 damage. Or how about you run your classic Hearthkin Warrior? Because that's the thing. You take Sisters of Battle, right? And if you want to go hard into only melee, you take Bloody Rose. But Kronus Hegemony has insane hybrid damage. Let's say you've just got 10. A classic squad of 10 warriors with a plasma sword. And you've got bolters, that's 20 shots at 4 minus 1, 1. And then they charge you and they hit with 31. No, sorry. It'd be 3 times 9. So 27 attacks at strength 5, AP 0, 1 damage. And then an additional 5 attacks with a sword at 5 minus 3, 1. Or 4 attacks with a gauntlet at 8 minus 2, 2. Kronus Hegemony is insane. That hybrid damage, that ability to do that kind of stuff is insane. It's so underrated because then it shores up your worry about being tagged in combat and gives you an underrated amount of attacks and power. Eldar just die. They just die. Okay, I've talked about Kronus Hegemony enough now. Let's talk about Ymyr. Ymyr Conglomerate is my favorite from a lore perspective because they're all about money. Money, 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 money. The Kronus Hegemony have a pretty disgusting amount of defense. Their 3-up save guys get a 4-up invul. Actually, no, everything gets a 5-up invul, sorry. Everything gets a 5-up invul, and 2-up armors get a 4-up invul. So all of your Terminators get a 4-up invul, and your Berserks get a 5-up invul, and your regular troops get a 5-up invul. They're great. They also get a 4-inch range increase to their weapons, and half range gets +1 AP with judgment tokens. Honestly, I think people have talked enough about Ymyr Conglomerate because it's probably one of the better ones that in the people's minds. Like increased damage characteristics that this warlord is equipped with by 1. Broke here Iron Master now has a 4 damage gun against AP 3 or better and melee attack. The Iron here Champion takes the Dark Star Axe. Now it gets 8 attacks at 2 damage because it makes 2 hit rolls, and you cannot use Feel No Pains or Wound Caps either on them. In fact, their stratagem allows you to do mortal wounds every time a beam weapon, one specific type of beam weapon, hits the target. And they have an insanely good relic. Once per battle, 3-up invul save the entire time, and the bearer gets a 4-up Feel No Pain against mortal wounds. Ymyr Conglomerate is very, very good, and I think you're going to see a lot of it. But my personal favorite in-game one is the USRS, the Urani-Surtr Regulates. They give you army-wide +1 toughness and reroll morale. This is a very good go wide type of build. Because let's not forget ourselves here. Votann have Void Armor, which is -1 AP and no rerolls to wound. The thing is that toughness is directly correlated to the wound reroll. And so having that extra toughness and turning off the rerolls to wounds is a doubly buffed effect with the USRS. Because when your regular troops are now T5, no reroll your wound. Your Berserkers are T6, no reroll. Hearthguard are T6, no reroll. Your Sagittars are T7, no reroll. And your Land Fortresses are T9, no reroll. It actually adds up very, very heavily. The rerolling morale is actually kind of nice on the big squads, but it makes it very nasty to deal with. Combine that with a 5-up Feel No Pain Warlord trait, which I probably won't take. Maybe, we'll see. But a 1 CP Fight on Death, which is very good and is not present in the rest of the book. And this relic, which allows you to not get shot unless you're the closest target unit, which it's okay. I'm sure it has a use, but I'm not 100%. But the Ancestral Judgment is really good. If a unit has 0 tokens, it counts as having a token. So you've basically given your entire army 6s to hit auto wound, regardless of tokens. Sure, it makes your 1 judgment token kind of bad, but it just allows you to stack up on the things you want to stack up on. So it's a nice go wide. You are now insanely tanky. You've got better damage all around the board. A fight on death. It's great. It's great. It's absolutely great. The USRS is awesome. The overall internal balance of this book is shockingly good. This is probably my favorite to run in game, but I think Kronus Hegemony is pretty up there because it's a massive sleeper pick. Someone is going to make the Trans-Rights Alliance become incredibly good. I don't know who's going to do it yet, but someone's going to figure it out. And then, of course, Ymyr and GTL are generally the common, people already realize they're good picks. It's unfortunate that the Judgment Token changes the way it is in this current thing, because auto wounding on 4 should not exist, but auto wounding counting as 6 should exist. I think there needs to be some kind of middle ground, and making that way actually work properly would be insane. It'll be insane. I honestly think Votann are one of the best written books they've done that just had a big numbers problem. Things were way too cheap and were turned up to 11. And yeah. And that's honestly what I've been thinking about. So yeah, that's my little list. That's my little discussion. I really like Votann. I think they're a lot of fun and they're a great time. And I'm really excited to play them. I've been building them up, creating myself a list. Really curious to see how it's gonna turn out.